Welcome. You have found the Vet Life Reimagined podcast. And today, my guest is Dr. Karen Trainor. She was recommended by a previous guest, Megan Parks. So definitely go back and listen to Megan Parks' episode. But Dr. Karen Trainor is a board certified specialist in veterinary pathology and is currently in Kansas City. She specializes in derm pathology. And that is actually one of the things that we talk about in this episode is that you can be very specialized in veterinary medicine. I even bring up the riches are in the niches. It's really interesting to dive into finding your special interest in veterinary medicine and how you can really thrive in that. And so Dr. Trainor has formed her own practice, and so she'll talk a little bit about how she went down that path of a more entrepreneurial path in veterinary medicine and all the different things that she gets to do with that. But we also talk a little bit about advancing technology in pathology and the importance of collaborating with specialists and making this really large veterinary team for yourself, for your patients to get that support. So I really hope that from this episode, you will want to make a veterinary pathologist your absolute best friend in practice. Karen Trainor, she has a little bit of a soft-spoken voice. I had to work on the audio just a little bit. She might surprise you in some of her special talents, and you'll definitely have to wait till the end to learn that a certain hidden skill may come with being a pathologist and being able to drive a microscope. This is a really, really cool episode. I'm so excited to bring you Dr. Karen Trainor, veterinary pathologist. Let's start from the beginning. When did you know you wanted to get into veterinary medicine?
Like many other veterinarians, since I was one of my earliest memories is family pets and animals and just being fascinated by them. And I used to examine my dog's teeth when I was little. So I had a feeling that I would end up somehow in veterinary medicine in some way.
Did your parents, what were their thoughts on your enthusiasm around animals?
They were supportive of it. They encouraged me to take volunteer positions in animal nature centers and things like that. So they were very supportive.
Yeah. And they gave you good advice. Experience is always important. So going into vet school, I'm always fascinated by different people's experience through that. So what was the, getting into vet school like for you and just kind of the initial process of being a veterinary student?
Sure, it was a challenge for sure. My dream school was always Cornell. That was my in-state school, being a New York resident. So I was waitlisted there, and then I got a spot actually. And yeah, it was definitely my dream to go there. So I'm glad I had waited and that it all worked out. Vet school was challenging. I would say the preclinical years were probably harder. They have a block system. And then I did mixed track my clinical year because I always knew I wanted to work with animals and be in veterinary medicine, but I didn't know exactly how because I'd had a number of different experiences. I worked with wildlife. I worked with in small animal practice and general practice and nature centers and worked in a bunch of different settings. And also before vet school, I'd done a master's degree in biodiversity, conservation, and public policy. So I thought perhaps find a way to incorporate that. But clinicals, I really, really loved clinical year. That was probably the best part about school. Because then it was a chance to really apply all that knowledge you've been learning in the earlier years. And so I just really loved that. And I loved every rotation. I loved the large animal surgery. I loved ambulatory. So it was kind of overwhelming. It was so hard to choose. But during the summer between my second and third year, I had landed an opportunity at a primate research center. And that was where I sort of got my first exposure to pathology outside of classes. And my mentor there that summer had told me, he sat me down at the end of the summer and he said, Karen, you should be a pathologist. And so I was like, oh, okay then. All right. And I had so much respect for him because he had gone to Cornell and had a PhD and does a lot of research and is very well regarded in his field. So it meant a lot to me that someone told me, hey, this is what you should do. So I was like, okay, I'll give that some thought. So then I started lining up some pathology externships and some different opportunities that I could find, and I fell in love going to gross rounds, Friday afternoons. I just loved it.
Being a resident, and I know in different specialties, there can still be lots of different paths kind of from there. I mean, it sounds like you're enjoying your residency. How do you decide the next step? Because that's always like the hard part, right? Once we're kind of at the end of that training and we have to go out onto the world. How did you decide what to do from there?
I was really torn before my residency, after vet school. Even though I knew I wanted to go into pathology, I couldn't quite close the door because I'd enjoyed my clinical years so much and working with animals and clients. So I'd done a small animal rotating internship in Rochester. And so having that clinical experience while going into residency, my dream job would have been to work at a large specialty practice and do pathology there and be able to interact with the clinicians and have that sort of clinical exposure and do pathology. But there's only one or two places in the country that do that. So the three main options when you come out of pathology residency are tox path, so doing research, working usually with like a drug company, academia, or going into diagnostic pathology, usually in the form of working in a reference lab or perhaps a state diagnostic lab. But those are really the main three options. And so I ended up, it was during the Great Recession, so I didn't quite have a lot of choices. So I ended up doing a fellowship in cardiovascular pathology, and I really enjoyed that. But my heart, I think, of those three main options was really in diagnostic pathology. But I still love teaching and being in sort of that research type of setting. So it was very hard to choose, but I ended up working in a reference lab. And then with the way pathology is set up, there's been a lot of consolidation in the field. So that lab was bought by a larger competitor and dissolved. So then I was faced with, well, what next? So I thought, well, my dream job was always to work in some capacity where you have some more contact with clinicians and work more closely with them than in a reference lab setting where you're so far removed. So I thought, well, my dream job would be to work more closely with clinicians, have some ability to do teaching, some research, some, writing manuscripts, but focusing on diagnostic pathology, but especially germ path, because I really fell in love with germ path. So a job like that did not exist. So I thought I would take some time to research it. And I worked as an independent contractor for a variety of different reference labs, small boutique labs around the country. And then when I was ready, I ventured out on my own and got my own clients and really niched down into germ path specifically. So now I have clients in 39 states across the country, and I do consulting. I run a vet derm path forum on Facebook, and we have over 5,500 members from around the world, more than 100 countries. So I get to do teaching and consulting, and so it's a blend of everything that I ever could have wanted. So it's a dream come true.
I like how you didn't let that, it didn't seem to exist, and you started to create your own dream. But that's not easy. That's actually very terrifying. It definitely can be, I'm sure. What was that like, that process of trying to, talk yourself into, well, I'm in control. So what can I control? What am I going to do? And then start building your own business. What were some of your thoughts and concerns through that?
Oh, absolutely. I had a lot of doubts, it was terrifying at times and still is, because you never know what can happen. But I always love that motto. I think it's the Marines, improvise, adapt, and overcome. And that's what I told myself, getting into vet school, going through vet school, residency, studying for boards. Pathology boards have, at least historically, had a notoriously low pass rate, sometimes 25%. And so it was a lot of pressure, especially during the recession when there were only like 8 jobs listed in North America for pathology.
Oh, wow.
So it was a lot of pressure to pass that. That's the motto I'd always told myself, and that failure was not an option. No matter what came up, I would somehow find a way, and then just reach out to people and ask for advice. So I have to thank a lot of people along my journey in the past and even now. I reach out to mentors and other people that are running their own businesses and ask them what they did, what worked for them, what didn't work for them. And people were always so generous with their time and their knowledge, and I'm very grateful.
Yeah. I think we have a unique profession that is when it comes to vet or even in the whole vet family of veterinary technicians, we really do care and try to support each other. We're all needed. And so anything that we can do to help the profession, I think we try. So a lot of good mentorship, I think, in this profession. It may require actually asking for it though. It may not just necessarily drop in your lap.
Absolutely. It required taking that step and reaching out to total strangers, either calling them or writing to them or walking up to them at conferences and just saying, like, hi. oh, letting them know that I really admired what they were doing, or and that if they had any advice for someone that was starting out trying to do something either similar or slightly different, more niche down, since I was really trying to focus on derm path. But everyone's been so wonderfully kind and helpful, and it's been fascinating to learn that there's so many different paths aside from just general practice or things like that. There's so much that you can do with a veterinary degree. It's really been eye-opening.
Yeah. Well, as you've been able to meet some of these individuals, do you have like an example of one in particular that really inspired you that was like a unique path that you didn't know existed until you met that individual?
Hmm. Well, one of my colleagues, she does dental pathology. And so I did not know that, and like oral pathology.
Yeah.
And she's written a textbook and she does a lot of lecturing and speaking and publishing. And she was one of the people that really encouraged me because when I was starting out and making that transition from being an independent contractor to taking on my own clients, I would say I was sort of torn whether or not to go the option of reading all types of biopsies, surgical biopsies, or really niching down and following my like secret inner dream to just do derm path or like 90% plus derm path because that's what I really love. And I remember talking with her and she told me, Karen, go for it. Like niche down. That's what you really want. Go ahead, go all in. Go ahead and do that. That will set you apart. And it seemed really terrifying because it seemed I wanted to serve all veterinarians. I wanted to serve everyone. I wanted to help everyone and do everything. But that's not necessarily sustainable and perhaps not what I would have been best suited to do. So it was really inspiring to hear her success. And also, there was another pathologist similarly that gave me the same advice, and he does only ocular pathology. So he had given me similar advice as well. He said, just follow your dream. And both have been so successful that I know one of them had stopped accepting new clients because their practice was full. And so I was like, okay, all right. I did not know that was a thing. I did not know you could make a living being that specific, but I will do that. That's because that's what I really, really deeply want.
Yeah, you're following what I always hear from entrepreneurs, even outside of veterinary medicine, is the riches are in the niches, right? It's finding your unique gift to the profession, and it's really fun to be able to find that because I think we can get a lot of enjoyment out of it, and there is need for whatever you find as your niche or niche or however you want to say it. There is a need. You mentioned something about you think that they're successful. Might be a hard question, but for you, how do you define success?
For me, it's about being fulfilled and doing all the different aspects that are important to me. Like being my own boss and having my own practice means that I get to take time off when I need it to go be with my daughter or go help out in her preschool classroom or attend, holiday party or something during the day that I feel like maybe I wouldn't have been able to do in previous positions I was in. So I really like that, and getting to choose conferences that I go to. Running the Vet Derm Path Forum is something that brings me a lot of joy and fulfillment. Doing consulting on BIN, like I have such a wide range of interests. And so being able to pursue those without the worry of, getting tenure or promotion or something like that, having that stress hanging over me, to me is very fulfilling. So I teach Derm Path to dermatology residents at independent private practices. So I really enjoy teaching residents. So that fulfills that need for teaching and building those strong relationships with my clients and getting to know them. And then practicing the way that I want to practice is very important to me. I don't have quotas as I would have at a reference lab or even as an independent contractor. I'm not handed, 60 or 80 cases a day and say you must get all of these done in a day, because I felt like I couldn't do my very best for every single case. So now I can have a smaller caseload and really get into it, and I can apply, because I did have that clinical sort of experience, exposure, during vet school and the internship. And I've always been very attached to the clinical side of things. So I love reading through the histories and trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. So that is the most fulfilling thing to me. Like I just had a case yesterday. It was a drug reaction, and it was, I got to text back and forth with the dermatologist, and we were putting all the pieces of the puzzle together and getting all the history, and he was texting with the owner, and then we figured out, oh yeah, it's probably a reaction to this medication that was causing this really bizarre inflammatory pattern. That's really rare. So that is what's most satisfying to me, is being sort of that person that can handle those really tough, weird, bizarre cases that require a lot more in-depth research, and being able to take the time necessary to really dive deep into that and really do my very best to get to the answer, to get that pet a diagnosis, and get that clinician some usable information they can take, and not just write a report that's word salad, but something that they can take and like, okay, I know what my next steps are. I know what I need to do, and I can help this animal and help that owner and help them to feel better sooner. So that's what's most fulfilling.
Yeah. I like that you said that. I just had a conversation last night with someone who does consumer insights. So it's a lot of taking data and helping businesses know, and including veterinary, by the way. But, data is great, but if you don't know your next step after the data, it's, you're stuck. So being the person that can help them with that next step, I think is really satisfying. And I want to call out something else that you kind of said. We were talking about it's good to find your niche, but at the same time, one of the values you expressed is I still have flexibility. I still get to do a lot of different things. So finding a niche doesn't mean cornered, right? Because there's still so much you could do with one particular interest or topic in veterinary medicine. So I'm glad that we can kind of explain the differences there too. You still have a lot of flexibility with how you express or deal with that particular focus. So I like that a lot too.
And I really enjoy it. I also have some clients that are not dermatologists or derm specific. I work with some equine specialists and other general practitioners, but they send in really interesting cases. So even though I've made Derm Path, my bread and butter, it's, the vast majority of what I do, like, I still really enjoy working with horses and stuff. I enjoy doing that mixed practice during my clinical year. So that's something I really enjoy. So I have that flexibility to sort of choose, in a sense, who I work with and how we work together. And I'm so grateful for my clients, because they're all amazing, and they make what I do with just the joy every day. So.
Very nice. Now, as a veterinarian, what is the best piece of advice that anyone has ever given you?
Mm, I would say mostly just follow your dreams and what you really, really want. Like, even if it seems impossible, or like no one else is doing it, or it's not the popular thing to do, or The most obvious thing to do is if there's something you really, really deeply want, go after it and don't hold back and just find a way, reach out to people, ask for help, and just go for it.
I think that's good advice. Absolutely. And on the other side, you said you like being a teacher. You work with all sorts of people in their career journeys from, I know you mentioned residents, other specialists, all sorts of things. So what have you noticed about the profession that if you could give one piece of advice, you would give?
If you're faced with, some negativity, don't let it get to you. Don't take it personally, and just find an outlet that's outside of veterinary medicine, something that fulfills you and recharges you. Because while we are veterinarians and it is very important to what we do, it's not completely our identity. And we are more than just that, because we are whole people with, families and friends and interests and hobbies. And, especially if it involves something like losing a patient or making a bad call or finding out something after the fact that we could have done differently or better. That is really hard. It's hard not to let that get you down or make you go to a dark place. But just remember to put things in context and remember all the good that we do and all the animals that we do help and the people that we do help. Because we may have a bad day or make a bad call or a bad decision, but in the big scheme of things, it's pretty small.
Hi, we'll be back with the second half of the show after this quick break. But first, I wanted to take a moment and thank you for listening to the Vet Life Reimagined podcast. If you're enjoying the show, the best way to support us is to leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast app. It really helps us to reach more listeners, and we really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. And now back to the episode. Do you have a personal example that you could share where you had an instance where you were starting to get down and then you found something that kind of helped you?
Probably my very first case as an intern. I had a patient present in Addisonian crisis. The total protein was normal, but the dog was a large breed dog. She was dehydrated. So she was actually hypoproteinemic. And so my mentor, my attending came over. He's like, oh, let's treat for Addison's. Does he know this? We don't have any blood work. We don't have anything yet. He just knew what it was. So we went ahead, placed 2 IVs, got slam bags. We're pumping her full of fluids. And then we went to go check on her. She perked up. She looked, like she was coming back to life. We're like, oh, this is awesome. This is great. We're making progress. And then she started having difficulty breathing. So then things took a turn, and it turns out we were fluid overloading her because she was hypoproteinemic. Mm-hmm. I was heartbroken by that, and then we weren't able to save her. And I was really, really crushed by that. And I felt like I was personally, at least partly responsible. And so that made me feel pretty low. And so it helped to talk about it with my intermates. And then I used that case as a teaching example to teach them, to hopefully that, maybe my mistake will help others to learn, so that maybe if they encounter a dehydrated patient with a total protein within normal limits, they might think, before, about fluid therapy, about how best to approach that. But one thing I've always done outside of veterinary medicine is dancing. So I like going out dancing, like swing dancing, blues dancing. And so going out and getting into a completely different environment and being around other people really helped me to realize that there is more to life and that we can't save everyone all the time. And that, I did do my best with the information I had at the time. And I did learn from that, but it helped me to get some separation, some distance from it, and to realize, I did my best and I tried and I learned from it, and I tried to make sure that at least her death wasn't in vain. And, I tried to share that. And it helped having something else outside of veterinary medicine to sort of reset and recalibrate and then go back and try again.
Well, I appreciate that you shared that because I'm pretty confident that everyone in this profession has had a similar story to that. So,
At
um,
least,
yeah,
at
at
least.
least one, at least one story. And it sounds that teaching is also part of how you give back and feel like you can improve and have some purpose and meaning in some of the things that you do. So,
Oh, absolutely. I use that in a lot of my lectures. I use that when I'm working with residents or anyone. I try to think of past mistakes that I have made or have encountered that others have made, and without trying to necessarily assign blame, because I don't feel that's terribly constructive or helpful, but just say what happened and then how we can learn from it and what we can do to prevent it or guard against it, or at least have something on our radar to try and do better next time. Because sometimes, even if we do everything correctly, there's nothing we can do to necessarily save them.
yeah.
But yeah, I do try and use those lessons.
I'm curious, in your business that you run, do you have a team? Do you hire do you have a part of a team or is it kind of
Um,
you solo?
it's primarily me solo, but I do work with some colleagues. So I work with a couple of veterinary dermatologists that do consulting for me. They're also independent contractors. I work with a couple of excellent veterinary pathologists remotely, and they help out with cases. And so I have their help as well. I also work with some virtual assistants. So it's grown a bit, but it's still technically solo. But I do work with other people, and that's made all the difference in the world because I wouldn't have been able to grow as much. I've learned from them different ways of approaching things, and it's just nice to have colleagues bounce ideas off of and share cases with. And I also work with several mentors that help me out if I'm stuck, so that I'm not, completely alone. If I need guidance on something, I know I can reach out and they're just a phone call or an email away.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of value in career as well as life is building a team. Maybe it's not like you're paying them kind of team, just having those people around you to support back and forth. And you mentioned some of the ways you were doing your cases. You were talking about texting with a dermatologist or a GP. I can't remember now, but so it sounds like you do a lot of, I mean, technically telehealth. Is that correct? I mean,
To some degree, yes. I encourage all my clients, and even if they're not my clients and they're just posting in Facebook and I come across a germ related case and someone needs to biopsy, I'll take those images and I'll mark them up. These are from like shop the images of the areas that would be given the highest diagnostic yield. Because I really do want to make sure, even if I'm not the one that reads the biopsy, that whoever it is set up to give them the best results that they can get, because that might be their only shot to get biopsies. I do a lot of sort of remote consults that way, and I encourage clients to email or text images to me, and I will put together a presentation for them, mark them up, and show them all the areas. I'll text with people back and forth about results and see if I can get some more information to craft my comments in response so that they get the most useful report that they can. So I like that part.
yeah, no, I love that aspect. I mean, again, back to you're as a good teacher when you can show visually where things are, and I think that can really help us practice best medicine. So we're giving our best for our patient. Technically, we've kind of been doing telehealth in some form or fashion for a very long time, but have you seen progressions in technology and the way maybe people are picking up on some of these resources that we have?
Absolutely. I think technology has come quite a ways. Part of how I set up my practice was learning from how other labs are set up. And I specifically chose a software system that allows my clients to upload clinical photos when they submit their cases. So I have the clinical images to correlate the histopath findings because I find that so helpful. Sometimes there will be something in the image that I see and I'm like, oh, this just doesn't add up. Or, oh, I see the image and now I know exactly of what five differentials is going to be this one. So I'll put that one at the top. It's extremely helpful. So having that technology and the ability to have the images available. And then also I use a software program where clients, for my business, where they can text me images and I can respond to that and we can communicate back and forth. Also Zoom has been super helpful. There's a lot that's changed and I almost feel like the pandemic, if there's a silver lining to it, has allowed for more consulting and collaboration through different means, and especially visually, that's so important to pathology.
Yeah. Oh, I love the word you use, collaboration. I wish we could use that one more often, is that especially in our profession, a lot of it is collaboration. So,
With pathology, we are removed from the client. We can't lay our hands on the patient. And examining a slide is like doing a microscopic physical exam. So the clinicians are like our eyes and ears in that sense, and they're the ones that give us that information, either descriptive in the submission form or with images or a combination of those. Sometimes even I get videos, which are really helpful. They can upload those or share those with me. So there's a lot that we can do, but it really is pathology. I think of all the specialties is really the most like a team sport because we can only give as good as we get. So we can only work with what's in front of us. So it's really about having that relationship and that open communication. Technology has really helped to improve that.
being a nutritionist, I totally understand that. Yes, absolutely. Is there a gap that you see in whether it's ways of working, or is there something that could make your work maybe better?
I would say more communication and collaboration between pathologists and clinicians. Because at all these big conferences, pathologists, but I would say in particular anatomic pathologists, are sort of the black sheep and are never included. Yet I feel pathologists have so much to offer clinicians. And I think there's this illusion that pathologists either are asocial or introverts or that we're just off in a box somewhere and you send off your sample and then you magically get a report back. But I feel that if we had more communication and collaboration, we could really help each other a lot because I learn a lot from clinicians and the images that they share and the cases that they share and the feedback that they give about reports, and what's most useful for them versus what's not as helpful to them. But I also feel that as diagnostic pathologists, we have a lot to offer because part of our training is gross pathology and making a diagnosis just based on an image and a clinical appearance or postmortem. But we are very good at coming up with differential diagnoses and how to prioritize them and what the next steps would be on a diagnostic plan of how best to proceed and prioritizing which would be most beneficial. So I do feel that that's an area that could be improved. I don't know quite how to crack that, but I think if there is more communication across the board between pathologists and clinicians, that it would only serve to help patients and clients and veterinarians alike.
Well, I hope this episode makes everybody want a pathologist as their best friend. So maybe this is a start.
Hopefully so, because our success is their success. So, like, we want to support them, and they can be a great resource if you reach out to them. So, we're here to help.
Of all the cases that you get, is there a question you wish people asked more?
I would say I do wish that people would ask how best to biopsy a particular lesion if they have a certain diagnosis in mind. I wish they would reach out beforehand before taking the biopsies, and then I can help set them up for success because the way you take biopsies for, say, an alopecia case would be different than how you might take them for a suspected infectious or other inflammatory process. And I can give them like an entire mini tutorial. I can mark everything up. I can tell them what size, how many, if they need to draw lines on the specimens before they take them, if they need to set up, take samples for culture as well, or which biopsy techniques to use, to set them up for success. Because sometimes I get samples and I'm like, oh, but they missed this, or they didn't sample that, or they only took one instead of all three masses. And sometimes I can actually hear the person, like hitting their hand on their forehead on the phone. And so it's like, missed opportunity. So I feel very lucky that most of my clients, by the time they find me, they know that they're welcome and encouraged to ask those questions, or they already have that information. But I do think that's something that would go a very long way to helping, because like I said before, like as pathologists, we can only work with what's in front of us. So if we don't have optimal samples, then we can't give optimal results always. So I would say that's probably the number.
I think that's a great one because I don't know if everyone knows that they can do that. So, how do you envision the ways of working with you? So, they have a pet, they see a lesion that they're concerned about and they're considering biopsy. What is the process that you would recommend them take to work with a pathologist?
I usually get emails, but sometimes I get like Facebook DMs or text messages, and they'll say, "Hey, I've got this case. How do I biopsy it?" And so then I say, "Great, biopsy scheduled, on Thursday or something." I download the images I put together. Usually I do it in PowerPoint, or if it's on my phone, I'll just mark it up on there. And I'll circle all the areas that I think they need to sample. I'll tell them my wish list of how many samples, what size punches, double punch, wedge, biopsy, shave technique, what would work best for them, and then send it back to them. And then, email is probably the easiest way to do that, because then they can give me a little history and tell me what it is they're concerned about. And then I can help make sure that I tailor the recommendations exactly for that case and for their exact concerns. So email probably be the best way to do that. And that's part of the benefit of having a good working relationship and open communication with the pathologist is having that support, because then their success is tied to yours. And we really do want clinicians to be successful and to get those answers and to help those animals. It's just that that's our way of doing it.
Do you have a website for people to find your email and everything?
Yes. innovativevetpath.com or hello@innovativevetpath.com. I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn. And if anyone's a veterinarian or a specialist or a veterinary student or technician or nurse, they're welcome to join the Vet Derm Path Forum, which is on Facebook. It's a great learning resource and place for people to share interesting cases and tips. And if you're looking for differentials, it's a very warm and welcoming community.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to share this and let people know that they have these options and to maybe encourage that collaboration within our profession so that we really can grow and do better for our patients. And I think this also allows us to learn maybe where we're interested as well. I think that's really unique. And actually, I was talking with Aaron Smiley, very big on telehealth, and he actually really loved working with his specialist because as he worked with the specialist and they taught him certain things, he started to get better at identifying things along the way. So I think it is just a really unique opportunity to create this really cool network within veterinary medicine. So thank you for what you do. Well, the final four questions. The first one is, what is something that people may get wrong about you?
I don't know about so much me in particular, but I think pathologists in general is that we're not interested in working with animals or clinical practice because we are at a microscope. I think we are still very interested, and that we do want to interact and engage with our colleagues. And we would love to be included and to include them in what we do. Yeah, that we're available and always willing to help. I think people just do think of us as being in a black box. And
Well, we're going to change that. Speaking of, since you brought up animals, do you have pets right now?
I do. I have a cat. His name is Newton. So he likes to come and crash sometimes when he just interrupted rounds yesterday. So walk across the camera or in front of the microscope. So.
Never a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with a cat walking through your talk. So love
The
that.
right crowd for it. So
Exactly. Second question is, do you have a hidden skill or interest? Although you've been very kind, you've shared a couple already, but do you have any other hidden skills or interests?
I don't know. I'm very good at spotting loose change on the
Ooh,
ground, parking lots, and driving in reverse, parallel parking. Is a skill I think is from working at the microscope. You have to coordinate everything is backwards when you hand scan. So,
I
uh,
never would have thought about that. That's
uh,
I have respect because I do not do the parallel parking. I'm a country girl. There's no need for parallel parking, so I like that. Third question is what's on your bucket list?
oh, traveling and dance events. Yeah.
Ooh. Do you
So
have one in the near future?
I'm hoping to go to DCLX. It's a Lindy Hop Exchange in Washington, D.C. So I'm hoping to go to that. There's lots of blues and fusion events I want to go to. So
Nice. Do you have like a favorite dance?
I think blues and fusion, but probably blues if I had to pick just one.
That is really cool. I'm excited for you. And the last question is what is something you are most grateful for?
I would say my daughter. I'm most grateful for her.
And you said she's in preschool?
Yes, yes, she's cool.
Has she expressed interest yet? Do you see a mini veterinarian in there or a mini something?
She does love animals. She adores them. And she has a little veterinary kit. And of course, I had to get her a little microscope for her birthday this summer. So she likes to look at things under the microscope. So I don't know if she'll become a vet or a pathologist, but she does have a deep love for animals. She also likes art and singing. So we'll see.
Love it. Well, thank you. I really appreciate your time and sharing. I I think this was a great conversation to keep reminding people about the opportunities to collaborate in our profession. I think it's good not only for our clinical skills or patients, but also for our well-being, because I think that helps us know we're not alone. We have support. And I mean, that's what's really the joy, right? Is the people in our lives. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Dr. Karen Trainor. All of the links that we talked about will be below in the description. March is Women's History Month, and I am excited to put together quite a few inspiring women around the veterinary profession in these episodes this month. If you are looking for another episode to dive into, I highly recommend the episode with Dr. Jeannie Bishop. On YouTube, it's called The History of Women Veterinarians, and oh my goodness, that episode really blew me away. And listening to Dr. Jeannie talk about her experience getting into the veterinary industry and how we really have changed quite a bit. So it was a really good episode. I would definitely recommend that. Speaking of YouTube, make sure that you go check out the YouTube channel. It's a little bit different. I'm still trying to figure it out. So I would love your feedback on what you would want to see in video. So please jump over to YouTube, hit subscribe. Thank you for being part of the Vet Life Reimagined.